issues like prosperity and praise and strict biblicism, fundamentalist Christianity. We don't see enough of that, and I think that's part of our problem. We need to revive what Dr. King was about. Go back to this idea of a social gospel that challenges structures, institutions, unjust structures, institutions, laws in society, and that are interested in creating a world that is what? That in which poor people can realize their dreams, a world in which
where people are fed,
where people are fed
housing,
and they have medical care, and there's no war and that kind of thing. I don't think we're pushing those kinds of issues enough, unfortunately, in the divinity schools and seminaries of this country. I mentioned to you earlier a 3-volume work that that is developing out of the Morehouse School of Religion now on the black church and public policy issues. And what we are looking at, of course, is the public policy activism of black churches. And we are talking about these same kinds of issues. What role should the church and religion play in addressing issues such as social welfare, such as health care, housing, women's rights, racism, issues of diversity? I think in reparations, we need to understand that that if we're going to be what Dr. King called the chief moral guardian of society, if the church is going to assume that role, we got to be concerned about these kinds of issues.
You know, soon we'll have an individual who will come to us to talk about this whole issue of AIDS again. Now, I think one of the real problems that we've often talked about on this show is the lack of any involvement of the church dealing with this as one of the crucial health items of
the AIDS crisis.
Yes, and,
yes.
What would you suggest over the last 2 minutes that we have here?
I think it's a golden opportunity for not just the black church, but for churches in general in this society to get involved. Interestingly enough, one of Africa, as you well know, would be the epicenter of Christianity in the 21st century. There's no question about it, because Christianity is growing rapidly there. And I think it's a good opportunity for our churches in this society to make connections with African churches and churches in Asia, which are growing rapidly, to address this crisis of HIV/AIDS. We're not doing enough in that regard. And I think part of it is because of the kind of interpretation, or the kinds of interpretations that churches have placed on this crisis. That is, you know, they see it, many of them see it as God's judgment on America or on the world. And I think we need to see it as a kind of health crisis that threatens our very existence as human beings. And churches should be able, particularly the mega churches, to put their resources, their personnel to the service of dealing with this kind of crisis.
Very good. And so Dr. Baldwin, over the last minute and a half that we have here, you believe that the churches can go back to a period where they are not only concerned with souls, but also have a social outlook and to have a very real social responsibility.
Yeah, I think it's all about recapturing the legacy of Dr. King and those who were involved in the civil rights movement. I think if we read Dr. King and study Dr. King, of course, Dr. King has much to say to us even today about the role of the church and religion in addressing public policy matters and how religion and the church figure into public life. I think it's a matter of going back and being, you know, studying Dr. King, studying the history of this country and how the debates have unfolded over time around this issue of the role of religion and the church in public life. I think there's much there that we can learn, and I think we can recapture that prophetic dimension that was so characteristic of Dr. King's ministry.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, over the last 15 seconds, let us thank you for bringing that excellent information by and giving us at least some guidelines as to how we might be able to become very, very more sensitive in terms of religion. And of course, we'll be back with our audience next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.